And greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here, live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace here with Todd Erzin, who has returned. Good to see you, brother. And also Aaron McIntyre here as well. We are brought to you by our friends over at First Cup Coffee Company with a flavor for every freedom-loving American. You can try them today. Get a discount when you go to firstcup.com and use the promo code DACE. Don't just get it because they share your values, but get it really because it's great coffee and they share your values. Firstcup.com, promo code DACE for the discount is where you want to go. All right, the roast on date there on every bag. Freshness is their MO. Firstcup.com, use the promo code DACE. All right, coming up on today's show, Pop Culture Tuesday. You know us, we'll just look at data. We'll question our own premises, but has Disney corrected itself? Because right now they have overwhelmingly the top two movies of the year after several crash and burns over the last 4 or 5 years. So we'll get into that later in the program. We'll get into idolatry or not. There was an incredible meme posted by Elon Musk, I thought, this week, pointing out that when the idea of resisting totalitarianism is brought to people via a plot device in fiction, they get it. But that when it's brought to them in nonfiction, in a real setting, and it's right in front of them, they often don't, and in fact will even resent you bringing it up to them. So we will get into that with Elon Musk and his meme coming up for idolatry or not, and see if we can, is there a psychoanalysis here or a spiritual one? We'll get into that in the next hour of the show. At the bottom of this hour, I mentioned this yesterday, and we're going to quantify it a little bit more with a guest, our friend Alvin Lui over at Courage is a Habit. But why am I getting serious Denny Hastert vibes from Tim Walz? Like serious Denny Hastert vibes. We'll get into that at the bottom of the hour. Before we begin the show, though, I want to bring something to your attention and close the loop on it, and then hopefully be done with it. I referenced something yesterday, and several of you asked me about this in the aftermath of me mentioning this. And this actually came to my attention because many more of you mentioned this to me over the weekend. So on Friday, I was invited on to Steve Bannon's War Room show with my good friend Congressman Chip Roy being asked to guest host the show. And the topic was why I believe this should be the largest evangelical turnout since we've been quantifying it in the history of exit polling in this election. And that the worldview difference between Donald Trump's New York City of the 1990s and the Minneapolis, London, and San Francisco that Kamala Walz represents of 2024 it's interdimensional. We're not even talking shades. It's interdimensional. I mean, Donald Trump put out 20 promises yesterday to the American people. Many of them are actually pretty doable, I would say. But even if he only got like 3 or 4 of the 20, just randomly pick any of the 3 or 4 of the 20. It would be a solar system sized different direction for the country than where we are right now. I'm not even talking lesser of two evils. We're beyond that. Like, one place, the New York City, Donald Trump's New York City of the 1990s, we may not be the dominant worldview, but we're welcome to the table. We're not shunned, and the gospel is preached openly. And you are welcome to openly live out your faith. And white Republicans can beat black Democrats for mayor, and we don't burn the city down with a race riot. The Kamala Walz, Minneapolis, London, San Francisco of 24 uses all the coercive power of the state to target our belief system for extinction. And anytime someone doesn't get their way, there's the threat of burning the city down with a riot. That's not a lesser of two evils argument to me. If that is to you, God bless you. You are a better person than me. I mean, that just seems pretty practical. One is survival. I think that was the analogy you used a few days ago, Todd, referencing the Independence Day speech from the movie. Mm-hmm. One is we get to survive and be functioning members of society and welcome to the table. And the other is we're literally on the run. We're fugitives. I mean, that's pretty obvious to me. Maybe to some of you don't agree, and that's fine. But that's not a lesser of two evils argument to me. That is, one is a good place to live and the other place is evil. Okay? And this was an overwhelmingly positive interview for the former president and his campaign. Unfortunately, a lot of you did not see it. And this came to my attention because a bunch of you started emailing me saying, hey, I'd love to share that interview. I heard it and I want to share it with my friends, or I saw you mention it on the show that you were going to be on or on social media. I'd love to see it. Where's it at? Including people we work with here at the Blaze. And I wasn't sure where it was at. I couldn't find it myself. Plus, we are busy doing our own show. And Friday I was helping my youngest daughter move into her apartment. I just didn't have time to follow up on all this stuff. And so as the weekend approached, I was able to confirm that it was true. My interview had been edited out of the show. So I just started spending the next couple of days asking around. I suspected I knew why, but I want to mercy triumphs over judgment. You want to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I did some checking around on several fronts. And what got back to me is that essentially putting me on that show caused a meltdown within the inner sanctum of the War Room show. Now, let me say this. I've never met Steve Bannon. I don't know him at all. I'd never met anyone associated with that show. Don't know them at all. I believe Natalie Winters is on that show. I think we had her on at one time. She did a great article that we featured on the show. Only interaction I've ever had with her. I don't know much of that ecosystem on a personal level. And I'm sure I've done things that have alienated people. That's just my way. Okay. But I want to bring this to your attention for two reasons. Because now I'm being told that that you can find it there now. So I don't know if me checking around and the hornet's nest that stirred up made them post it or not. I don't know, and I've moved on. But I'm bringing this to your attention for two reasons. Number one, on behalf of our own show, Todd and Aaron are given a very visible voice on this show, as Jen and Rebecca were before them when they were here. But ultimately, it is my show. Has my name. And it's about what I believe, ultimately, more than anything else. And then more than anything else, you get to decide whether you agree or disagree with that. And so I take all the heat and the credit one way or the other, because that goes with sitting in this chair. And I'm okay with that. And I'm a big believer in the plaque that Ronald Reagan had on his desk in the Oval Office. It is amazing what you can get done when you don't care who gets the credit for it. Anybody that knows me will tell you a couple of things about me. I am uncompromising if I think I am right, to the point of annoyance. It takes a lot to move me off a position. You can do it, but it's hard. Secondly, no one will tell you I lied to them, treated them poorly, I was unfair to them, I cut them out, I didn't pay up, I didn't deliver on a deadline, because I understand, and I had to learn at a young age in this business, that the way I'm going to do this show on the air is going to be unyielding. And I have to compensate for that in treating people very well. Plus, my Lord mentioned something, a few times in his word about not giving people reasons to disqualify you and your testimony beyond the fact that they just don't agree with it. So we really strive to do that. And I'm not upset or anything at all. I admire Steve Bannon. Don't know him at all. Steve Bannon's one of the few people in this business I've seen actually risk something. Steve Bannon is sitting in a prison cell right now. I mean, I think I've risked quite a bit. I've put my career on the line several times, including walking away from WHO with a job I could have held forever if I wanted it, and not knowing what my future was going to hold. But let me tell you something. I've never risked prison. He has, and he did it voluntarily. It's one of the most badass things I've ever seen in our movement/industry, and I have an immense amount of respect for it. His show, at least when I see the clips I see of it on social media, because I don't have a lot of time to listen in depth and watch in depth a lot of shows with everything else I have going on. So I try to keep up in general with what shows up in my feed and trends. His show routinely is one of the few in this business that actually teaches me things I did not know. Gives me angles and perspectives I otherwise did not anticipate. We have taken a lot of pride in the work that we have done on COVID during the course of this show and the risks that we took. But if there's anybody with a large platform on the right who I will submit actually did a good job of pointing us in the right direction, it was Bannon and his show. They were way ahead of us on the jab. And the work they did elevating Naomi Wolf's really important research to that end is incalculable. She wasn't getting platformed anywhere else. And ultimately, that is all that matters to me. Todd and Aaron will tell you, even if you put the Wonder Woman lasso of truth around them, when I say I don't care if everybody from the intern getting the coffee to Steve Bannon himself hates my guts, as long as they keep doing what they're doing, I'll be their fan. They'll tell you that's true about me. I don't care about any of that. And I wanted to make everybody understand this is a one-sided grievance. I don't have one. And I, in fact, respect the courage of his conviction. Admire it, frankly. And I don't really say that about a lot of people in our business that I actually admire. But he's sitting in a prison cell right now for what he believes. When too many people in this business do this, looking at trends and downloads and views before deciding what it is they're going to say. So I have nothing but respect and gratitude. COVID to me was the litmus test of true courage so far in my career. I hope there's nothing worse. I fear there will be. But as of now, 18 years into this business, nothing has tested the courage of people more than COVID did. And you're going to have a hard time outpacing Steve Bannon on that front. So I don't bear any personal grievance whatsoever. I'm a big boy. I understand I've taken some contrarian opinions. I'm fine taking the heat for it. But I don't want to be a part of any kind of back and forth when we're, in my view, we might be wearing, we might have a different name on the back of the jersey, man, but we have the same name on the front from my perspective. But there's another reason I want to bring this to your attention, though. To me, this is an example, unfortunately, of why we have consistently lost on the right in the last generation. Our inability to put personalities and platforms and tribalistic instincts and were you with me this time or that time, or can I count on you for this even if I know I'm wrong, but I need you to cover for me while I sell people out over here, or I'm going to take people that are plowing the same field I am. Jesus says, had his disciples come to him once and say, hey, Rabbi, Master, over here is somebody casting out demons and stuff in your name, but they're not prophesying with us. They're not touring with us. They're not ministering with us. Should we go over there and shut them down? And what does Jesus say? By all means, don't do that. If what they're doing is righteous, whoever is not against us is for us. We need more of that on the right. Way more. Way too much of, yeah, but if we unite behind a candidate, then my so-and-so or I so-and-so won't get this. Or if Matt Walsh's new movie does for the Daily Wire what his first movie did, it means somebody else's platform will suffer, and so we actually don't want... Matt Walsh's first movie is one of the most important works this entire industry and movement has ever created, whether it's on my platform at the Blaze or not. And ultimately, we spend way too much time, and not in ways that are productive. Like, stop promoting a substance that is poisonous to people. We're literally advising our audience to risk their health. And I did. I went after someone like Ben Shapiro, whose intellect, you guys know, one of the few intellects I have a high regard and respect for. But he was giving his audience advice to take something that was toxic, okay? That's what we should be arguing with each other about. Like the kinds of issues that determine whether or not we're going to have a future as a civilization, or whether or not people like Steve Bannon are going to have to be put in prison or not for what they believe. But often that's not the stuff we argue about. It's like the church. We're going to argue about what clothes we're going to wear, what music we're going to sing, and not the stuff of actual doctrines and creeds and the stuff that determines eternal destinies. And I wanted to bring this to you guys' attention and close the loop on this at the top of the show, because I just think it's a small example of the amount of time and energy that is wasted on our side up against an absolute Leviathan cult monolith of singular thinking, zombie-like. And we are not going to beat them getting involved in petty grievances with one another, or, hey, you weren't with me long enough before, so you can't be with me now. I've seen that too much in this business. I don't want to be a part of it. I try to avoid being a part of it. But it's a little window into why we haven't won a lot. But I don't want to be a part of that. And I hope the Bannon show continues on the path it's on. It's making all the right enemies. Even if everybody there hates my guts, won't change my opinion of their work or their show one iota. And I would urge the same to all of you if you love our show, just the same. And with that, here's Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Trump on X. It was another bumpy launch of last night's X space with Elon Musk and Donald Trump, with the former blaming a massive denial of service attack on the social media site for the technical issues. The duo, once the space actually got going, spoke for about 2 hours on myriad issues and trolls, including this.
To happen with stupid people like Biden. You know, Biden did something with Russia. There was no chance of him ever going in. And when I left, and then after I left, they started forming big armies on the border with Ukraine, right? And I looked at that, and I thought he was doing that because Putin's a good negotiator. I thought he was doing that to negotiate. But then Biden started saying such stupid things. For instance, he said that it can be a NATO country. Now, Russia, for as long as there's been NATO, has said we're never going to agree to that. And we go right up front and say that. And we did things and said things through this president with a low IQ, very low IQ. He had a low IQ 30 years ago, by the way, but now he might not even have a IQ at all.
Musk says their conversation, as of this morning, netted around 1 billion views when you take into account various reposts and conversation threads about the space. The Harris campaign came out with a statement in the aftermath of that conversation saying, quote, Donald Trump's extremism and dangerous Project 2025 agenda is a feature, not a glitch, of his campaign, which is on full display for those unlucky enough to listen in tonight to whatever that was on X.com. Trump's entire campaign is in service of people like Elon Musk and himself, self-obsessed rich guys who will sell out the middle class and who cannot run a live stream in the year 2024. The Trump campaign seems to have taken control of Trump's X account, posting several times yesterday in the lead up to that interview. The campaign also released their 20 core promises to America should Trump win in November. It echoes much of the GOP platform. Included are the ending of the weaponization of government, stopping the illegal crime epidemic, demolishing the foreign drug cartels, crushing gang violence, locking up violent offenders, keeping men out of women's sports, and deporting pro-Hamas radicals. Check out this from Time magazine. This is their new cover that features a posterized version of Kamala's mug, very Obama-esque, with the words, her moment. Tucked inside this nearly 3,000-word booklet, a puff piece on Harris, is this sentence, quote, her campaign denied a request for an interview for this story. And now a flashback to the aftermath of the George Floyd riots in Minneapolis, when 3 Minneapolis Police Department members testified in front of the Minnesota State Senate, saying that leadership all the way up to the governor, Tim Walz, abandoned them.
That's not what we stand for.
Her voice shaking, Minneapolis Police Sergeant Anna Hedberg says during the riots, officers were abandoned by state, city, and department leaders.
To watch them go through that was so heartbreaking. To know that they could have died because we were not allowed to respond the way that we have been trained to respond.
During the riots, the officers were told they could not wear protective frog suits, but were still hit and injured with bottles, cement, and more. Sergeant Hedberg blames state, city, and department leaders for the abandonment of the 3rd Precinct.
I heard the governor say, give it up. It wasn't directly to me, it was through a phone call. How the governor says, give up the precinct. I mean, that's demoralizing for this whole state.
And the 3 described a demoralized police force with dozens of officers planning to retire or quit.
I believe I speak for every Minneapolis cop when I tell you that I've never been more publicly humiliated.
Moving on and checking in on Dr. Anthony Fauci.
I got infected about 2 weeks ago. It was my 3rd infection, and I had been vaccinated and boosted a total of 6 times.
Say what now?
I got infected about 2 weeks ago. It was my 3rd infection, and I had been vaccinated and boosted a total of 6 times.
In further, least surprising news of all time, here's David French's latest at the New York Times. To save conservatism from itself, I'm voting for Harris. Major League Baseball has suspended outfielder Jordan Duran for 2 games for retorting to a heckler by using a word that should only be used to describe Lindsey Graham that rhymes with bag. Duran began his suspension last night, and Major League Baseball says his salary for the 2 games will be donated to the Federation of Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, which is an organization which supports and funds efforts to ensure kids have access to genital mutilation and chemical castration. And finally, I saved this for Todd. I heard this, so he has to as well. This is a fan of the Indianapolis Colts who came up with a song to pump up his fellow fans for their preseason game against the Denver Broncos.
This is our Colts, this is our team, we bleed blue. This is our Colts, whether win or lose, we love them. For the shoe, beat the Broncos, let's show them who the real horse is. This is our team, go Colts!
And that's what happened while we were away.
That's a troll, right? That's a troll.
No, I don't know. I hope so.
Because if it's not, it's one of the most idolatrous things I have ever seen. For those of you that don't know, that's a worship song.
Todd doesn't know. That's a worship song. That's sung in like every...
You can't hurt me with that. I told you.
He literally took the lyrics, he bore the cross, beat the grave.
Guys.
Let heaven and earth proclaim this is our God, King Jesus, and turned it into a song for a football team.
A
preseason game. It's one of the most idolatrous, blasphemous things that we've ever depicted on this show.
Smash the idols. All of them.
Wow. Wow. Aaron's Montage brought to you by our new friends over at First Liberty. Now, I'm not new to First Liberty. I've known those guys for a long time, but they're new here to this show. When President Biden dropped his bid for re-election, he told us one of his top priorities during the last few months in office was to, quote, reform the Supreme Court. Now he's introduced us to his unconstitutional plan that will end life tenure for justices and pose a binding code of ethics from people that don't know what a woman is on the Supreme Court. Don't be fooled. President Biden's reform scheme is nothing more than a desperate attack to end the legitimacy of the judicial branch. His proposals are both unconstitutional and a threat to our constitutional republic. And that's why First Liberty, America's leading constitutional experts in protecting religious liberty, is asking you to join them and over 500,000 like-minded patriots in the fight against this brazen power grab. You can join them in the fight to save the Constitution by adding your name in support of their statement of judicial independence. It's time to say no to the Biden plan, no to court reform, which is not any reform, no to the Supreme Court coup. For more information, you can add your name. Please check out the supremecoup.com/Steve. That's right. Don't Venezuela my United States. supremecoup.com/Steve. That's supremecoup.com/Steve. By the way, the number one grievance in the Declaration of Independence against the king had to do with what the king did to the judiciary. It's mentioned a few times in the Declaration. And that's why they created the judiciary as a third branch. The founders, the British monarchy had 2 branches, Parliament and the Court of King James. And Parliament during that era reported to the Court of King James. So it was not independent of the court. It was just a strict monarchy. And all the judges came from the king. So they didn't have an independent judiciary. They didn't have a place to go. That's what independent means. It doesn't mean independent of the Constitution. That's what the other side thinks. It doesn't mean independent of the laws of nature and nature's God. That's what the enemy thinks. But what independent judiciary means to us is that it's independent of the other 2 branches in offering us a third opportunity to uphold the laws of nature and nature's God and our God-given rights. And that's the part of its independence that the Biden people want to do away with. All right, on Aaron's Montage, let me say this because I spent much of the open yesterday talking about my concerns about where things were with the former president's campaign. And of course, this is what you get for being patient. I waited for well over a week. I worked the phones, talked to some people I know to see if I'm just overreacting because maybe there's things I don't know. And then I finally decide to air my concerns on the show yesterday, and then they come out and have the best day they've had in a month. So great. All right. But yesterday went really well, I thought. I think it's the best day he's had since the bloodied fist pump. Well, Steve, what about the convention? I think his meandering convention speech is really the only thing about the convention people remember and talk about now. Right. So I think that kind of the convention. But yesterday they came out with a great ad invoking the Gippers. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? That was a great ad. And then the 20 promises that the former president listed yesterday, which Aaron highlighted just a few minutes ago. As I mentioned also just a few minutes ago, many of those are very doable things. But even if he only did like 3 or 4 in a second term, any 3 or 4. I mean, just look at maybe the one that's going to be the most trivial to many of you, the electric car stuff. You guys understand why it is they want you to drive electric cars, right? So they can turn them off, guys. Even the best electric cars on the market right now can maybe go 300 miles on a charge.
Yeah, why aren't the police mass adopting electric vehicles for their cruisers?
Correct. It's so they can turn them off. It's much easier to turn that off. A self-driving car, an electric car, much easier to turn that off to limit your mobility. That's what it's about. It's about control. So you're like, why does that even have to be listed? That's why. It's part of it's an outreach of the coercive, nature of progressivism. So even if he only did 3 or 4 of those things, it would be dramatically better, the trajectory for the country than it is right now. And then, I mean, first of all, I don't hear slurring of speech. I don't know how much corporate media I read this morning claimed the president was slurring his speech. I didn't hear any of that.
Ongoing audio fidelity issue with Twitter Spaces, depending on the microphones you use. It always sounds like you have a lisp. It always sounds like you're slurring, no matter who's talking. Because I remember one of the first Spaces that I listened to, I'm like, I've heard this guy talk. It was like some sports thing. I've heard this guy talk before. He does not have a lisp. It's an audio fidelity thing.
But even if all they did was this, for an hour and a half last night, they just went back and forth making fart noises to their armpits. I mean, I don't know where it's at right now, but as of this morning, that thing had gotten 73 million views on X. Now, X is very, shall we say, relaxed with what they call a view. I think it's 30 seconds, Aaron, is a view on X. Is that right?
So, yeah.
Okay, but so let's assume everybody that tuned in that has watched this so far only watched or listened for 30 seconds. They didn't. But let's just assume that's the case. At the very least, the Trump campaign constructed the most watched, listened to 30-second ad in the history of political messaging. That's the low bar of what they accomplished last night. Not to mention, because of the delay, this thing didn't start till about 9 o'clock Eastern now. We're talking about a 78-year-old man. I mean, Joe Biden's calling lids at 2 p.m. throughout. Seriously, that's not even a joke. Throughout much of his presidency, Kamala couldn't be bothered to do a sit-down interview with anybody. Yesterday was a big win. Now, no one can have 3 big wins every single day. You can't do that, okay? And running for president's really hard. You're not always in control of the message. You have to react to events. You're not getting, Ted Williams, his greatest season, he still failed 6 out of 10 times. All right, this thing's really hard. Have realistic expectations. But consistently, if he can stay focused. Now, I'm not going to say disciplined. I don't want a disciplined Trump, because most of the time when people say disciplined in politics, it means you have the same stump speech, you have the same talking points. It's a mantra. It's stale. I don't want Trump disciplined. That political discipline doesn't disrupt anything, and many things need disrupted. What I do want him, though, is focused, okay? I want the zaniness that I want to be like, oh man, I wish we went too far talking about how bad illegal aliens are, not, oh no, we're going after Heritage Foundation again. It's not about being undisciplined or about discipline, it's about being focused. If there are more days where they are more focused, like they were yesterday, over the next 80 plus days, Trump will win. And if not, he won't. So our friends at Hillsdale have extended your access to this inspiring portrayal of Thomas Jefferson as he reflects on the meaning of the Declaration of Independence from a letter that he wrote late in his life. They introduced this for Independence Day month back in July, but you can still watch it now. Perfect for back to school, especially if you're a homeschooler. Great supplement to whatever history curriculum you're doing, and then even more so if you're going to send your kids off to the government schools. You need to immunize them. All right. So this is a vaccine that works. All right. So you want to watch this video. It's outstanding. Plus, you'll get a special free commemorative copy of the Declaration as well. When you go to daceforhillsdale.com, F-O-R, so use the preposition, not the number. daceforhillsdale.com is where you want to go to see this. Again, daceforhillsdale.com. All right, let's welcome back to the show our good buddy Alvin Lui from Courage is a Habit. Good to see you again, Alvin. How are you?
Good to see you. I'm doing great. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. You guys really focus a lot, for people that don't recall, you guys really focus a lot on the grooming that goes on in the schools, and in particular, introducing kids to trans propaganda and things of that nature. And so I wanted to begin with kind of a weird question. But can you tell me why I'm getting serious Denny Hastert vibes from Tim Walz? Not a joke, not tongue in cheek, not a joke. Like, I'm just telling you right now, if my kids were little, I'd be like, keep your distance, man. I get serious Denny Hastert vibes.
Yeah, so he's the kind of guy that on the surface, he looks harmless, but it's these weak, spineless men. They're the most dangerous men on the planet. These weak, spineless men, because people like him, they can't stand up for anything. He goes with whatever is convenient and whatever he feels won't get him any labeling. And this is a guy who in 2023 happily passed and signed a transgender trafficking bill. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what a transgender trafficking bill is, very simply, it means that children from out of state, outside of Minneapolis, can go into his state, and if the parents of those children do not agree to put the child through transgender drugs and mutilation surgeries, the state will not reunite the parent with the child. And furthermore, if there's a case of custody where you have one parent that have full custody, the second parent don't have full custody, the parent that does not have full custody can bring the child over, and the state will not honor the home custody agreement. And that's what a transgender trafficking bill is. And this guy signed it in 2023 as House File HF 146. So the vibes that you're getting is not only is it just a vibe, he's law these kind of horrific bills that separate children from their parents.
Now, keep in mind, folks, again, this is a state that as of August 1, 12-year-olds can't sit in the front seat of a car. All right. So in the state of Minnesota, as of August 1st, 12-year-olds cannot sit in the front seat of a car. When you say children, how young are we talking here? Alvin, do we know?
No age. No age.
No age.
Any adult can, no age. Any adult can bring a child over to any of in this case, Minnesota, and they can say, the parents don't want to give this child the irreversible drugs and surgeries, and we're saving their life. It's life-saving healthcare. This is why we hit so hard on language contamination, because they'll always keep the language very high level. And one of the things that we try to teach parents is the concept of language contamination. And the easiest way to remember this is they use your vocabulary, but not your dictionary. And it's designed to keep you complacent, keep you going, oh, it's not happening. Oh, it's just healthcare. Oh, it's just gender affirming care. That's why they use these phrases, because these, we call them child mutilation advocates, these transgender child mutilation advocates like Walz. They're cowards. They hide behind the language contamination because they can't be upfront with what they're doing. And so they call it, trans refuge bill and things like that. So this is why it's so important for us to be able to name it and tag it and be able to continue to drive forward what they're actually doing instead of playing nice and trying to use neutral language because we don't want to inflame the middle crowd, things like that. We don't do that. At Courage is a Habit, we believe in staying on offense and naming it and tagging it and being and exposing what these these transgender child mutilation advocates are doing, like Walz.
Amen. And the point you just made there a second ago, Alvin, about using your vocabulary and not the dictionary. So I got a note yesterday from a gentleman who said, hey, man, I'm getting killed right now by friends and family because I repeated your talking point that 12-year-olds can be counseled with gender dysphoria in Minnesota, but can't sit in the front seat of a car. And I brought this up to friends and family, and they all Googled it and said, no, you've got to be 16 or 18 in Minnesota to get bottom surgery and all this kind of stuff, okay? And I knew about the legislation that you're talking about, okay? And that's why I wanted to clarify this, all right? That there is no, if you are in a custody fight in Minnesota, or in another state even, and you want to go to Minnesota because my husband won't let me. I left my husband because I'm a cat lady and he's fighting me. What I want to I want to feminize my son. Minnesota's a sanctuary state for this. It's basically the California of the Midwest.
Right, exactly. It actually, and there's to date there's 16 states that have a transgender trafficking bill, and we have to start calling it that. We have to start calling it a transgender trafficking bill because that's exactly what it is. You're bringing a child over to a state out of state, and you're not reuniting them with their parents. And so they try to hide behind these things like, oh, you can't do bottom surgery until you're 16 or 17, but it doesn't mean you can't do a double mastectomy. It doesn't. And so in Minnesota, yes, in Minnesota, if you're a child, you need your parent consent to get surgery if you're under 16 or 15 or whatever the law is. But here's the nuance. If a child is brought by another adult over to one of these transgender trafficking states, like Minnesota, there's no parents to give them consent. They belong to the state. They put them in foster care. And so then the state can authorize it. You see the nuance there. So when your friends were saying, they're saying, look at the law, you can't do it, and you can't do bottom surgery till you're 16, so it's not happening. No, it means that you can't do a bottom surgery. You can't get your penis chopped off until you're 16, but you can get a double mastectomy at 13. But if somebody brings you over to another state, then the state is able to decide. That's why it's a transgender trafficking bill. And this is the dishonesty of the transgender cult. They try to hide behind these nuances because they don't want parents to know the horrificness of what's going on. And we were talking about this for about 2.5 years. We've been fighting the transgender trafficking bills, and people were like, oh, it's an isolated incident. Oh, it's just California. And now we've got a potential future VP who's been picked, who signed HF 146. And it's literally a copycat of California's SB 107.
What is the difference between the transgender trafficking movement and the sex trafficking industry? What's really the difference? I mean, both use drugs to essentially lure people in, right? One's narcotics, get kids hooked on narcotics. The other is puberty blockers, right? The idea that if you give over the most intimate parts of your body to a system or to serve some agenda of adults, that it'll be what's best for you and you'll find your way, you'll find your place. I mean, ultimately, what's the difference between the two?
There's zero difference. They use the same playbook. But I'll tell you if there is one difference, between sex trafficking and transgender trafficking bills. When it comes to sex trafficking, if a parent says, I live in Texas and I think my child is in Minnesota, I think she was sex trafficked. The Minnesota law enforcement and the Texas law enforcement will work together to share information to try to find this child. They'll do everything they can. When it's transgender trafficking, nobody's helping the parents. That's the difference. And so in many ways, the transgender trafficking, believe it or not, is actually even worse than the sex trafficking because there is no state-sanctioned sex trafficking. Plus, there is no system in place in K through 12, even though there's a lot of grooming that happens. There's no system in place in K through 12, in government K through 12, where a child spends 7 hours a day, 5 days a week for 13 years, where there's a school counselor or a teacher or the culture that normalizes sex trafficking. They're not trying to give empathy to a sex trafficker or to someone who exploits children for selling them to a sex trafficking. There's no such thing as that, even though you can argue, obviously, there's a lot of grooming in place to get them to be vulnerable. But there is a system in place for transgender trafficking. There's school counselors, and we've talked about that on your show. It's called social emotional learning. Mm-hmm. It's mental health. It's school counselors. It's teachers. It's flags. It's books. It's the whole culture of normalizing grooming, this transgenderism. So it's even worse because there's no such thing as a system that gets a child that wants to be sex trafficked.
And this is institutionalized. Of course, this comes with the approval of the government, not a seedy creep that drives up in his unmarked van and takes your kid out of the front yard. But this comes with the official seal of the government of the United States of America, basically.
Paid for by your tax dollars.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example of the sex trafficking versus transgender trafficking. I'll give you a real simple one. And again, we're very happy to work with a great organization called Freedom Forever, and they battle sex trafficking, and they're wonderful. And they're a good friend of ours. And one of the things that they taught me is that one of the earlier things that a sex trafficker or exploiter will do with a child, the moment they can get her out of the house, they can groom them online and things like that, but they will start to take her shopping to change her appearance, to get her ready for whatever it is that they're preparing her for, whether it be prostitution or whatever the case may be. Also, they change their clothes and their hair drastically so that when they do finally get them out of the house and never bring them back, that when a parent brings a photo over, you can't find them because they're so different. But they don't do it right away. They start buying them clothes that are real risque and things like that to get them used to dressing this way. But of course, when they bring them back to the house, the child changes back to their clothes, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a grooming. So that's what they taught me. That's what happens. That's sex trafficking. In transgender trafficking, in K through 12, it's called a transition closet. And schools have them. All 50 states. If you have a teacher, you have a counselor that has these transition closet, you have the GSA clubs, those clubs in schools, they will. Which
Tim Walz, by the way, speaking of creeper vibes, he was heading one of those in the 90s before they were socially accepted. That's again a Denny Hestert vibe, man. That's what it is.
That is Hestert, exactly right. And he was one of those. Then this is why he doesn't come out. He's not one of those guys that pull up in a van and grab your child. He's not an overt groomer that way.
No, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. That's
yes,
what
right.
it is.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And so these transition closet, they keep the clothes, and so the girl goes, I'm a boy. She goes to school. She changes her clothes, changes her everything, names, pronouns, everything. The school keeps it a secret, and then she changes back and goes home.
Same exact thing.
Is exactly what a sex trafficker does, but this is state sanctioned through transgenderism in schools.
One may argue because they come from the same source. Alvin, good to see you as always. Where can people get more information, particularly as we are heading back to school? Your organization's more needed now this time of year than ever before. So where can they go?
CourageIsAHabit.org. CourageIsAHabit.org, or you can follow us on our social at Courage Habit. We're on X, on Instagram as well. And all the tools that we built is for the average parent, and especially parents going back to school right now. We highly recommend parents use our opt-out forms. We've got under strategies, under school counselors, we've got opt-out forms. We got a brand new one called Blood in the Water. If you go to CourageIsAHabit.org and click on strategies, that's the one that helps you take your kids out of social emotional learning programs. It doesn't get them out of all social emotional learning. I want to be real clear about that because it's baked into the culture, but it does help a lot when parents start using our opt-out forms. And anytime you share our tools or support us in any way, every dollar goes right back to our fight. And we appreciate people like you, Steve, and you're a good friend. And it's good to see you again.
You bet, brother. Same to you. Thank you for all your work, man. Keep it going. All right. Take care.
Thank you.
You bet. Brought to you by our friends over at Jace Medical. They've got an exclusive giveaway right now. You can win a Jace case for life. That's right. You can win a Jace case every year for the rest of your life. No purchase is necessary. If you want to enter this contest, it expires on August 31st, so the end of this month. So enter today at jace.com/Deace, Jase, for jace.com/Deace, which is also where you can go to get your Jace case to make sure you've got a backup of some of the best antibiotics humanity's ever discovered. You can also expand your Jace case if you want to their ever-growing extensive menu of medications to make sure you have backups of the meds you need or a loved one needs. That could be the next to be slandered or slimed by Anthony Fauci's system. All right, get a discount on that order with the code DACE. Code DACE when you go to jace.com/Deace, Jase, jace.com/Deace. All right, gentlemen, what do you think of the conversation we just had with Alvin Lui?
Well, you know that big worldview gap you're talking about being the biggest it's ever been? Listen, we've had groomer elections, certainly locally school board elections, back in 2022 in the Virginia governor's race. That ultimately amounted to a groomer election. But with Walz on this ticket, this is a full-on groomer or no groomer election. And Steve, yesterday listening on my drive home from Tennessee, listening to the show, and when you talked about your being in your backyard and looking at your family out there, that was a Shire description you were talking about. That's the gap we're talking about. The Shire versus open season on sexually abusing your kids and calling it education. Make no mistake about it. That is exactly what's at stake.
Aaron?
Did you see this point spread for Colorado versus North Dakota State? Only 8 now. That's basically what that we're up against, that and what I just said. Do people even really care? What is a normie anyway? Maybe that should be Matt Walsh's next documentary.
What's a normie?
Because I'm not sure. I mean, we're going to find out if they really exist, but we thought normies would come home in 2022.
I did.
And I still need to see some evidence that there's some great awakening happening, because what I see, that the picture in my head of a normie is just the average sports bro who maybe has a family, a wife and kids, but is so checked out, who doesn't really, whatever gets in the way of Saturday and Sunday, let's just get through that, just to shunt it off to the side. I don't know what that is anymore. And this election is going to be clarifying. Clarification is not always joyous, but I'd say it's always good. Having answers is always good. I think that this election is going to be the great clarification of our age.
All right, we'll get to idolatry or not. And I feel like after that clip of that Colts dude, this is almost a trite conversation, but we'll do our best with it when we return. Back with Hour 2 here, live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace with Todd Erz and Aaron McIntyre and all of you. And you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Email us, steve@stevedeace.com. DEACE, like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Getter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you're a podcast listener, thank you for being one of those. You're a big part of our audience. If you wouldn't mind and haven't done this yet, leave us a 5-star review if you like the show. You can also hit subscribe, or if you're on iTunes, follow. And that'll make sure that every single time we do a new episode, it'll show up right there in your podcast feed every single time. I have heard from many of you. Apparently, there was a technical issue with on our end. So the first 15, 20 minutes or so, Aaron, of the show, if you were trying to tune in live, was not available.
Basically the first segment.
Okay, so sorry about that. That's an error on our end, and we apologize for that. You'll be able to go and listen to the podcast and check out what you missed. All right, so thank you to all of you that podcast the show, and you're, again, a big part of our show's continued growth and success, and we greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Got this note the other day from Jacob. He says, I've had a pair of fitness earbuds for the last couple of years and a pair of fitness headphones for just under a year. Unfortunately, I've had to lay my earbuds to rest due to technical wear and tear. But I then got Raycons, and they were by far the longest lasting pair of Bluetooth earbuds I've ever owned. The fact that they made it that long, or they make it through long 10-hour workdays of welding smoke, dust, paint, and insulation, along with sweat from the workday in the gym, I just blew me away. And I'm optimistic that my new fitness headphones from them can also last like a decade. Thank you guys for introducing me to Raycon. They're my go-to recommendation for headphones and earbuds anytime I'm asked. Keep up what you guys are doing with the show. Go Blue and go Lions. So Jacob obviously demonstrating there a couple of different times in his note that he has amazing taste. Okay, so if you want to find out why Jacob in our audience is raving about Raycon, they're just phenomenal. I can't say it any better than he does right there. You can go to buyraycon.com/Steve today. Get 15% off your Raycon order plus free shipping. That's right, you'll get 15% off and free shipping at buyraycon, RAYCON. buyraycon.com/Steve. Again, buyraycon.com/Steve. Don't just take my word for it. Listen to Jacob up there in Michigan. He knows what he's talking about too. I mean, he's putting his Raycons through way more paces than I am, just going to lift a few days a week. All right. So buyraycon.com/Steve. Okay, let's get to idolatry or not, gentlemen. And I saw this graphic a couple of days ago posted by the world's richest man, Elon Musk. And for those of you that are not watching today, let me read this meme that Elon shared for you. You watched The Hunger Games and sided with the resistance. You watched Star Wars and sided with the resistance. You watched The Matrix and sided with the resistance. You watched Divergent and sided with the resistance. You watched V for Vendetta and sided with the resistance. When it's fiction, you understand. Yet you refuse to see it when it's the reality you're living in. Wild. And I saw that, guys, and I thought, we can have a conversation about that. Because I think this absolutely speaks to the zeitgeist. And it's one of the reasons why my company put up millions of dollars we didn't even know we had to make Nefarious. Because as we looked around the culture, I mean, it is possible, given the fact it was created and installed by the most powerful being in the universe, that if the church actually got serious about persuasion again, discipleship again, it is very possible that it could succeed at said endeavor. Fair?
Yeah.
But corporately, gentlemen, is the church is taking that seriously whatsoever corporately? No, it is not. So with the church, by and large, except for a remnant, off the table in this battle, we looked at the culture and found the only place where we thought persuasion was still possible was storytelling. That's the one place where if I bring it to you in a story form, you will let me confront your worldview in ways you would not if I just did so as a straight up treatise, as a straight up premise, argument. If I just posited it to you directly. And I think that that's exactly what Elon is touching on here. I mean, even the very industry that made all of these films that he cited, many of their biggest stars and celebrities will turn around and say that we're the autocrats here. All right, I was listening, I was watching a video from a British pop culture channel on YouTube the other day called What Culture. You guys ever heard of it?
Yep.
They've got some interesting stuff every now and then. Plus, I just always have thought British accents are very cool. Okay. So I click on one that in my downtime, I'm trying to unwind one night and I'm watching it. And the guy spends like 5 minutes about how this again is about some obscure movie list. Okay. And he spends 5 minutes pontificating on Project 2025. He's not even American. And how it's autocratic. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, like, you may not agree with what Heritage put in Project 2025. You may not like the direction they're taking. But, remember when Alvin Lui from Courage is a Habit, and what did he say the website was again? courageisahabit.org, right? That's where to go. Okay. What did he say a few minutes ago? Follow your vocabulary, not your dictionary, right? Because the dictionaries can be rewritten, right? Okay. you may not agree with it from a policy standpoint, but it is not autocratic to decentralize power from an autocratic entity and give it back to people. That's actually what's called democratic. All right? All right. That's not autocratic. All right? That's not, it might be wrong. It might be bad. We can argue that, okay? But we're never going to even argue that if we don't even know whether or not it's autocratic. It's actually democratic. And autocratic is not entirely bad, right? I would imagine at the Erzin household, it's very autocratic.
Yeah.
Correct? I mean, most decisions are essentially made between Mr. and Mrs. Erzin, correct?
Yes.
All right, so autocratic is not necessarily a bad word, all right? But when you're trying to be a free people, autocratic usually is not a good thing. Fair?
Right.
Okay, because it requires limiting freedom of the people in order for the autocratic to actually be deployed.
And to the extent you might be autocratic, it's your closed hand, open hand philosophy.
Correct.
About a narrow group of things that are non-negotiable.
Correct.
And then do what you want.
Correct. That's what the schema. That's the entire schema of the Constitution. Some things are autocratically determined by the federal government, and the rest are democratically determined elsewhere. All right.
So this British guy, what day of the week did this come out last?
I watched it like I don't know when the video came out, but I watched it I think like last week. Yeah.
Weren't they like arresting people for retweeting stuff?
Yeah, there's that too.
Yes.
So that's pretty autocratic.
Yes.
Threatening to extradite foreigners.
Yes. Right. It's like I used to hear from people when I first started out the show doing a biblical worldview. You sound very self-righteous. Now, listen, I may be wrong. My interpretation of the Bible may not be correct, and by all means, please correct me. I don't want to be guilty of blaspheming the Holy Spirit, and the Bible says the teacher gets, both double honor and then double the accountability, right? So don't eagerly sign up for that job. But I cannot be self-righteous in basing what I believe myself is righteous on something other than myself. My belief in that and the way I interpret that and the way I articulate that could be in error, right? It could be heretical, it could be heterodoxical, it could be false. But it can't be self-righteous because at its premise, I am removing myself and basing what I think is righteous off of something other than myself. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Might be wrong. It might be a lot of other bad things, okay? But it's not self-righteous to base your righteousness off something other than yourself. Those of you that are doing that are actually the self-righteous ones. Similarly, it's Project 2025 may be a lot of things. Autocratic would not be one of them, okay? So how is it possible then that that they make all these films that centralized government is bad, dystopian futures where no one has any individual identity whatsoever is bad, okay? But yet politically, it's complete conformity is what these exact same entities are for. And why doesn't the average person see it? Because understand who Elon Musk is. He just told you last night, hey, I'm the guy that waited in line 6 hours to meet Barack Obama. I've never been that politically engaged. I'd call myself probably a moderate. Many of my positions are the things that the Democrats believed in the 1990s. I mean, this stuff is just nuts. And they transed my kid. All right. And so I'm pissed at him for that. All right. He's like, well, this is pretty easy. Autocratic typically is bad. So I'm on the side that's for decentralization and because that's where prosperity goes. Right. So then why is he also right that most people can't see it? Why?
Well, I've been banging this drum.
Unless it's in a fictional setting, I mean, yeah.
I've been banging this drum for a long, long time. You'll recall, probably going back 10 years on this show. Before COVID, before I was doing the Braveheart thing. How you go into that movie and he gives that speech. And many years from now, to this day to that, we have one chance, just one chance to say you may take my life or you may take, but you will not take my freedom. And then you go out and you're like, I can't be bothered to do anything. I've been doing that for a long time. And it was just, last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, where I said, what's the point of these movies? All these bad things that have happened with these movies. So there's something's glitching. They're not working. And I have thought a lot about this. That I really think the answer to your question, Steve, and I think this is Occam's razor, quite frankly. I think these things operate on the people that watch them and appreciate them the most, the same way porn does.
Explain.
Because
I say this as a guy that has had a 35-year battle with pornography in our generation, and I've never been on the side of I've always figured this distinction out while fighting that exact same battle at the same time, right? So help me figure this one out.
But again, this has been in existence. Why isn't it calling us to higher things? It seems to be calling us to the exact opposite. There's nothing, and remember, the devil does not create evil. He perverts good. Stark terms. Your naked, beautiful wife is as close as you can get to God. So there's nothing wrong. There's something very right with women in that context, created. But then you put them on that screen.
When God looked at Adam and said, it's not good for man to be alone, and gave him a companion, what did he give him?
Yes.
A naked wife.
Yes.
That's what he gave him.
Yes. But then it's a stranger on that screen. Again, God's creation, stunning, beautiful, good, but a stranger over and over and over and over again, and you just become the equivalent of a crack addict. And I submit to you that if you are sitting down and you are the superhero equivalent of sports bro, and this is your whole thing, and over and over and over again, you are looking at good versus evil, heroism, again and again and again and again, and you never do anything. You have become a crack addict, and you are getting a fix on something that is clearly and obviously good, but you have utterly perverted it into inaction. And I think I don't think I'm being particularly clever. I think I'm applying Occam's razor. Men are supposed to be, we're not supposed to be docile. This is not a leisure pursuit. And we have become absolute couch jockeys. And it turns us into mush. I think if all you do is your own comic book land is all you do, if that's the most important thing in terms of your emotional and psychological worth, I think you have been harnessed by the ring of power, and I think it's no different than being a porn addict.
All right, so Aaron, I have a question for you based on what Todd just said. And I want to get your analysis of this because there's a generational difference between you and the two of us, okay? And I want to do that here after I talk about our friends over at Preborn. They are on the ground building clinics, finding women who are considering the murder of their children and confronting them with ultrasounds. And much of the time that a woman hears that heartbeat of her own baby and realizes that's not an unviable tissue mass, she doesn't go through with the murder of her child. And after that confrontation, now they offer the grace, all right? And when she's turned away, she's repented of what she was contemplating and then turned into being a mom. Now she needs support, and they provide that, sometimes for up to 2 years after the child is born. All the stuff I just mentioned that Preborn does, by the way, they do it all for free for the mom and the baby, all for the cause. And the cause is them. But the cause is not free, all right? So that's where we come in, and you guys here at The Blaze have been so gracious. I mean, it's in the tens of thousands of babies that you have helped save since we started our partnership with Preborn. Let's save tens of thousands more. You can make a tax-deductible donation today to preborn.com/Steve or dial #250 and say the keyword baby on your mobile phone. Preborn.com/Steve, I think, is the easiest way at preborn.com/Steve. So when Aaron, when we read comic books in our generation, we were then like fired up to go outside, put the towel in our shirts, put on the Batman mask, and act it out, right, Todd? We would act out what we had just read, okay? We would like play it out, okay?
And that's appropriate as a child.
Yeah, when we saw like Rocky montage, you know, the Rocky films, we'd go out and like play box and play fight. Let's even use the crude analogy of pornography that Todd mentioned, all right? You know, you actually got more aggressive chasing after girls, not for the wrong reasons. Todd and I would say now as the father of daughters, but in other words, these sorts of influences actually instigated action, not always in the most righteous of directions, but it instigated action. What I am struggling to understand is in your generation and younger Gen Xers, how these impulses have actually instigated passivity. Well, now I don't have to get a girlfriend at all. It's not that I'm going to overly aggressive pursue a girl because now my desires are stoked. I don't want I don't need a girlfriend at all. I can just sit in. It's now not an escape. It's an alternative. I don't have to go. I don't get inspired to work out. I just I sit here with another bag of Cheetos and watch Rocky Balboa do it again. Is it just that it took that long for this kind of messaging to penetrate that it created passivity, or is there something inherently different generationally that I don't understand?
So I think what we're watching now is the fruit of several generations of materialism being the operating, or kind of the modus operandi of life. And when I talk about materialism in this context, I'm not talking about consumeristic materialism. I'm talking about materialism as a philosophical concept, whereas nothing outside of what I can see and feel, nothing what can be studied down to the microscopic or atomic level, nothing exists outside of material, basically. That's what materialism means. Kind of a fast and loose definition, but that's basically what it means. We are seeing now the reaping of fruits of materialism being the modus operandi of our institutions for generation. And here's how it manifests, because it's even worse than Todd is pointing out here. We will watch movies, and I'm talking we corporately. We will watch movies, and we will see an amazing story. We will recognize themes within that story, okay? But at the end of the day, we walk out of the movie theater, and there's this wall between the concrete themes that are translated into a fictional story and the concrete themes that still exist outside of the movie theater. I know you hate this movie series. I still kind of like it. It's fun. But the original Pirates of the Caribbean, when Captain Barbossa takes... what's her name? Keira Knightley's Miss Swan, and she's on the Black Pearl, and she cannot believe that all of these stories that she's heard about the Black Pearl and these ragtag group of pirates are real, that maybe they're actually ghosts. And Captain Barbossa says, "You best start believing in ghost stories, Miss Turner. Miss Turner,
you're in one.
You're in one.
Yeah.
Too many people are." Miss Turner. I don't know why I said Miss Swan, but Miss Turner. We just, no, ghost stories aren't real. That explains the concrete wall, the impenetrable, so it seems, concrete wall between going inside the theater and seeing themes of good and evil and walking out. Because nobody believes that any of those themes exist in real life. Basically, your rubric, your plumb line of existing is whether you feel good.
Yep.
And if you feel good, things are good.
Well,
whereas in the past, you recognized these eternal themes, whether they were depicted in writing, whether they were depicted on the silver screen, whether they were depicted over the radio. You recognized those weren't just fictional things; those were things that exist in the real world. And when you recognize those real things, metaphysical though they may be, but when you recognize that metaphysical things are real nonetheless, even though you may not be able to touch and feel them, you cannot not be spurred to action, the acting out, when you are a small child. You cannot not help but do that. And now there's a wall there. Nobody recognizes that the themes inside of these stories, these movies, what have you, are actually real outside of the theater.
You are dead on. And I'm having the conversation recently with many of the Anons in the audience, and 9 times out of 10, my job, I have to be this way. I wouldn't be able to pay the bills. The game is over then, because that's not how in the movies things get done. But in real life, when that's constantly what you default to, if 9 out of 10 defaulted the other way, we wouldn't be talking about half the crap we talk on this show, because men would say, yeah, that is not how this is going to go. And no one even would try that nonsense. Instead, most of these men in their private time, though, they're writing songs about the cults. And they're a lot closer to that when it comes to that meaningless nonsense. Guy, Memo, you're not on the team. Nobody on the team knows you. Why are you writing sonnets about them? It's because it's pornographic. The same exact thing.
What is unique? Is it the medium itself, or the culture, or a ratio of both? And if it's the latter there, what's the ratio? Why didn't the printing press and the mass production of literature into native languages, all right, why didn't that lead to the kind of passivity? Because that would have been that era's version of pop culture, right? Reading Ivanhoe and Camelot and Arabian Nights, right? That would have been that era's, pop versions of pop culture. Why didn't that lead to the level of passivity that the current pop culture does? Any thoughts on that?
Because you're still trying to tiptoe between bubonic plague.
Okay, that'll do it. Yeah.
You're not really concerned.
I don't have indoor plumbing.
I don't really have the luxury of risking that. I don't have the luxury of risking that things beyond myself are not real.
So to you, it's more culture than medium to you. Todd, what do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple things. There's you simply, up until very, very recent times, you didn't even have the option of being as comfortable as you are all the time on multiple fronts. You didn't even have the option. And then when you did it, there's a simple, we turned a corner about what it means to be a man. And it would be utterly undignified for most men of the past to spend their days wasting away like this. It would just, even if you had the option, like, good grief. No, again, because you realize that this was, you're called by definition to action in one way, shape, or form. And we have I would sound like a Jehovah's Witness. I do. And they come and they resent the fact that I do this to them all the time these days. They're like, you don't know me. Well, I do. You're Legion. This is not how, I can't make it more plain, and this list is just like, it's so obvious by now. Walking in on sports radio, talking about the Olympics, and they were talking about, I know there's the great stories, some of the legends that ever were, but some of the best, my favorite stories are the ones about the weird breakdancer and the guy who knocked the high jump thing off with his junk. And, really, we love stupid stuff, and because that's why we're Americans, and that's what we're really all about. And this is sports radio. The whole point of the Olympics and sports is to be the pinnacle of human experience, the heights we can possibly achieve to glorify God's creation. Is that why most people are involved in sports these days, whether they're playing or they're watching? We know the answer to that, and that's why I mock it on a daily basis.
10 years ago, I would have said that the increase in interest and viewership in football, whether it's in the pros or college football, was a good thing because, as Steve likes to say, it's the last bastion of masculine meritocracy. These 10 years later, viewership and interest is through the roof for both of these. And I just pick on football because it's the most popular sport here. I'm not singing that praise anymore because it's obvious that's not what's happening here. It's just team, go team, go team, go team. And you can translate that to basically anything of non-import or great import across this country.
Look at that long Marvel thread of how many movies, Steve? Great movies, amazing accomplishment.
I don't even know, but a lot. Yeah.
But
you mean from the first one to Endgame?
Iron Man to Endgame. Yep. But this is what's important. We're doing it. It is accomplished in real life. It has flipped everything in reverse because we get Tony Stark, self-obsessed. He says it. It's a punchline of the entire movie.
Then he makes the Christ-like
and then he does
sacrifice.
the snap.
Yeah.
Real life, it's in reverse. We are becoming way closer to the original Tony Stark and Iron Man. We are utterly self-obsessed, and we're fine with it. We love it. Again, I've said before about politics. We resent that we have to be citizens at all. Can't we just put this on autopilot? Can't Tony Stark just build the robot army? No! But that's what you want. And that's what sports is doing to us, and that's what our movies are doing to us, and that's what video games are doing to us. It's appalling.
I think that's the best you've ever articulated your ongoing lament about this thing, is how you just laid it out and explained it. And I think this is the difference between escapism and alternative and building an alternative. I mean, escapism is not inherently bad. I mean, we were given imaginations for a reason. Okay? Even our Lord in the Gospels gets so frustrated and escapes to quiet places to be away from the masses. Okay? But what we're doing here is we're building alternatives. It's not I worked 75 hours a week on a job site with sheetrock, all right, for a boss who hates me, for a family that I love, and I just want a cold beer and 3 hours on a Sunday after church to watch a ball game in my chair to fall asleep. That's all I'm asking for in return. That's an escape, right? That's an escape, okay? The alternative is it consumes Monday through Sunday. And I am much more aware of the injury report of my fantasy team than my kid's report card. That's the difference. The idea in the 70s of taking church hymns and worship songs and turning them in, that just, you couldn't watch a football game in the 70s where someone wasn't holding a John 3:16 sign up behind the goalposts, okay? I mean, I go watch some of the old bowl games from the early to mid 70s, and on New Year's Day, like the Orange Bowl, man, they're showing the pregame prayer on national TV before they kick off. Now I take the worship song, as Aaron pointed out in his montage today, and I replace Jesus with the Colts. That is some of the most on-brand idolatry of what you've been ranting about, Todd, for weeks on this show, that we could not have created something more on brand than that, which is why I had to ask if it was real, if it was a troll. It's almost too perfect. But there is a difference between an escape and an alternative.
This is what I'm talking about. Some people live to escape. That's wrong. Some people escape to live, like having a little bit of fun in the midst of a life that's otherwise meaningful and purpose-driven. Not that purpose-driven.
And here's the thing I know I hear you. Here's the thing the Marxists, and we've pointed this out before, this is what the Marxists figured out after Tiananmen Square. If we give them just enough of the stuff we're talking about right now, they will give us everything we want.
It's cipher in the matrix.
Yes, and the Western
ignorance is bliss.
And the Western Marxists have seen this work for the Chi-Coms, and they're doing this to us right now. That we will be like, we're fine staying home and saving lives because Tiger King is consuming our thoughts. Okay? And that's where the cipher reference from Todd certainly comes into play. Remember when banks were community banks, had the values of the community? Well, now a lot of them actually end up bankrolling Pride Month, Pride Forever, every other Spirit of the Age scheme. There is an alternative for over 65 years, because I know what you're thinking. Well, man, I mean, it's not a certain economy right now. As it is, do I want to be putting my money in something that's a startup and unproven? And hey, I'm all for the parallel economy, but, that's a tough call. What about something that's been around for 65 years? So way longer than any of us on this show have been alive. That's America's Christian Credit Union. They've been serving God-fearing Americans for more than a generation with integrity and truth. You can switch to ACCU now for great rates, cutting-edge mobile banking, and access to over 5,000 shared branches and 30,000 ATMs nationwide. So yes, it can seem like a hassle, but do you know what big banks are doing with your deposits? America's Christian Credit Union was founded by pastors for the benefit of its members, and for a limited time, you can earn $400 when you open a new checking account with qualifying activities. Plus, our listeners here get an additional $100 bonus with the promo code STEVE at checkout. All right, give it a shot today. Those are some nice incentives right there. Visit americaschristiancu.com, Americas, plural, americaschristiancu.com/Steve for complete program details. americaschristiancu.com/Steve. Terms and conditions apply. America's Christian Credit Union is federally insured by the NCUA. All right, let's get to Pop Culture Tuesday. Men, And, you know, I'll follow the data, question my own premises. We have savaged Disney on this show for the last few years. And I think all deservedly so. And the data has indicated this. Disney had not had a box office flop since The Black Cauldron in 1983, which actually isn't that bad if you've ever seen it. But it had been about 40 years since they had a flop. And in the last... From 2022 till now, they had a handful of them. The MCU brand also firmly under the Disney banner, no longer bulletproof as well. Then there's what's happened with Star Wars, Pixar. I mean, these were signature brands in American pop culture, and they have all had numerous flops and failures in the last few years. And when you adjust for inflation, there have been periods of time where Disney's stock is trading at what it was 20 years ago when adjusted for inflation. Okay. They've had infighting. They've brought back the old CEO, gotten rid of another. There've been other people trying to take the new CEO who was the old CEO out. Well, right now, we have only 2 movies that have crossed the $1 billion threshold. Now, for those of you that are Todd and I's age and over, you know, the old mark for many years of whether a movie was an absolute, you know, signature blockbuster, you know, in the 70s and 80s, it was, did a movie make $100 million? Okay. So like when you hear like, well, this was the highest grossing movie of all time. If you adjust for inflation, it's not. If you adjust for inflation, Jaws, the Star Wars, A New Hope, The Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind are still among the top 10 movies of all time when adjusted for inflation. So the old number in the 70s and 80s was if a movie made $100 million. In the 90s and 2000s, it's if a movie has made over $200 million. Well, since the 2010s, and now China has become the second biggest box office in the world. Movies have begun, you know, toning down their messages to Chinese censorship. Global box office matters more than ever before. Now, the true, you know, mega blockbuster is if a movie makes $1 billion globally in every market. So far this year, only 2 movies have done that. And when you look at what the release calendar is for the rest of the year, there's a lot of actually interesting movies coming out, but like none that are like a guaranteed franchise. They'd have to catch fire on their own. So there are only, and these may be the only 2 movies that get to $1 billion this year. And they're both Disney films. Inside Out 2, Deadpool versus Wolverine have both crossed over $1 billion globally. And they're the only 2 movies that have done it. They're the only 2 movies that are even close to it, actually. So, has Disney course corrected? Gentlemen, your thoughts?
No. It's just sweet serendipity that the day that we're having this conversation, the morning of the day that we're having this conversation, I believe, isn't the new Snow White, isn't that Disney?
Yes.
Yeah. Co-starring Rachel Ziegler and Gal Gadot. Gal Gadot is an Israeli. And she's being absolutely... So they just released the trailer for this. She's getting absolutely flamed by pro-Hamas orcs because she's Israeli.
And I believe she served in the IDF, didn't she?
Yep. And what does her co-star do this morning? She goes out there and says, oh yeah, free Palestine, as her co-star is getting absolutely...
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely ravaged online by these pro-Hamas
I had not
orcs.
seen that. Oh my gosh.
Her co-star goes out there and says,
Rachel Ziegler?
one more thing, free Palestine. Yeah, this is the same Rachel Ziegler who talked about how, I can't remember, it was in the early phases, I believe, of Snow White, talking about how this needs to be reimagined or something like that in light of feminism, and, you know, you need to reassess. Just total total spirit of the age bull hockey several months ago. So, no, they haven't learned any
there
lessons.
were a lot of thoughts that movie was going to come out this year. And after the comments that you mentioned she made last year, that they put it off a year to distance themselves from these comments because they knew the movie was going to flop with her messaging. But if she's out there posting free Palestine to Gal Gadot, that's...
Not directly at her, but subtweeting.
Yeah, that's basically what that is. Yeah, that's for passive-aggressive social media Gen Zers, that's exactly what that is. Yeah. I had not heard that, Aaron. Wow. Todd, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, the entire business is still dedicated to grooming your children. A couple hit movies, I mean, it It changes nothing in that regard. They've made it plain that they are. I mean, going back to the start of the show, the Shire versus the groomers, they've made it plain they're on the side of the groomers. Do we really believe, once again, this is the greatest difference in terms of worldview? Because they're firmly on one side of it. So who the hell cares if they're making... And I went to see inside my daughter's, when my oldest, right before she went back, they wanted to go see a drive-in movie together. So saw Inside Eye 2, and I was amazed. It wasn't woke. But that's not the bottom line of who they are anymore. And they've told us that. We're not guessing anymore. So it's not... And I haven't seen the other one, and we just got done talking about how problematic I think superhero movies are. They're doing the opposite of the thing that they should be doing. They're not creating heroes, they're creating simps. So whether they're good movies, whether they make a lot of money isn't the point anymore. They're businesses that hate you.
Are they at very least attempting to make it seem as if they've gotten some kind of message?
No. These are both sequels. They're just guaranteed cash cows.
So they were, in your view, they're established brands, right?
Yeah.
But Star Wars was an established brand. They broke that.
Mm-hmm.
The MCU was an established brand. They broke that. All right. I mean, they have broken their established. We just talked about they had to postpone Snow White for a year because they were getting ready to break that.
This is what
that was the OG of that started Disney basically.
Our nostalgia and our comfort. The trend lines are so obviously in one direction. The minute it looks like it's toggling back. Oh look, maybe I can just go back and be doing absolutely nothing and not caring about it. And stop it. They own us. That you get, we really, adults, not just kids, adults are emotionally and psychologically owned by children's things. We cannot have a republic if that's the case. It's impossible. We can talk about revival all we want to. It's never going to happen.
Aaron, do you think they're at least trying to make it look like they've gotten some kind of message?
No. I mean, maybe if they come back and smack down Rachel Zegler, or however you say her last name, maybe that would be a leading edge indication that we're just here to make good movies. Maybe that would be a leading edge, but I haven't seen any indication publicly anyway that they have any effective or consequential introspection, which is not even a word that exists in the Marxist leftist vernacular. So no, they're not even trying. They're not even pretending, I don't think. Box office success, remember, they don't see things in terms of dollars and cents. They really just don't. They don't care if their movies are flops. They don't. If they're hits, great. If they're not hits, as long as our agenda got into it, great. That's how they see things. They don't see things through a market lens at all.
All right, I have a follow-up question for you guys after we remind you about My Patriot Supplies. Their mega 3-month emergency food kit comes jam-packed with 33 varieties of filling and delicious food so that can never happen here. Were to happen here, again, because we've suffered under quite a few that could never happen here in the last few years. You are prepared. Everything from old-fashioned Italian spaghetti, creamy chicken-flavored rice, savory cheese broccoli soup, and more. Plus, you'll get a bonus protein kit with diced beef, flavorful chicken chunks, and 3 varieties of beans, 9 different fruits, vegetables, and snacks. All in all, this emergency food kit provides a whopping 2,500 calories per day to keep you ready and well nourished, just in case that can never happen here. Happens here again. And that starts with food you can depend on for up to 25 years. So go to preparewithdace.com right now, and you can save $300 on your mega 3-month emergency food kit. Plus, it ships fast and free. That's right. Even bigger savings this time. You can save $300 on your mega 3-month emergency food kit, and it ships fast and free when you go to preparewithdace.com. Once again, that is preparewithdace.com. What would therefore be the indication to you guys that some lessons have been learned? If you don't think that they've learned any lessons at all yet, and they're not even pretending to, and you both agree on this so far, then what would be some signs that you think they have learned some lessons?
Well, it's quite frankly, it's the same as with COVID. And everybody's, if Donald Trump, and this is me, I was anti-vax before any of you gave a thought to this stuff, all right? But this is bigger than any one issue. Yes, even this issue. But if it was just this issue, absolutely right. Donald Trump doesn't deserve a vote. The very least, and Steve counseled, and this is what he was talking about just yesterday, I think, used every avenue he had at his disposal to try to just get him say, hey, you know, Fauci did me dirty. I thought I was trying to trust the experts on this thing, and it all went sideways, and I apologize. At the very least, it's the same thing here. You let Disney, we've been welcoming you. You've been welcoming us into your home for years and years and years, and you trusted us, and we abused that trust, and we're sorry. Until they do that for what they're doing, they're grooming your children. That deserves an apology. They poisoned your kids. That deserves an apology. It's not just making this better product every once in a while. Man, how many times do we want to fall for that stupid banana in the tailpipe?
Yeah, self-imposed consequences. You know what? We're going to issue a statement or come out. We're going to send our president out there and say, no, at the Walt Disney Corporation, we did not believe that wishing genocide upon a co-star's home country is how we do business. And then if you want to publicize it or not, or maybe it's just an internal thing, no, Rachel Zegler, you're not doing any press for this movie whatsoever. Okay, thanks for your performance. Yep. Here's your check, but you're not doing any press. Yeah, that would be a leading edge. That's not they've completely and transformationally. No, that would just be, like I said, a leading edge of just an indication that they have decided, you know what, no, we're going to change course.
Disney and the Olympics are the same. They're time-honored brands. And you saw the other one. You said it's a pretty good movie, Wolverine, Inside Out, a good movie. But there are a lot of...
It's very profane.
Yes.
But it's overall well done.
But there's a lot of amazing Olympic achievements that had just happened. They also had two men beat the hell out of women, and they had demonic opening and closing ceremonies, okay? Like, can we just keep this clean? It's like Scott Walker. I just like a clean balance sheet. And then he ran for president and had every other issue to talk about. I was like, well, oops.
Hey, we're back to that clean balance sheet.
Yes, guys. Both of them hate you, clearly. It doesn't mean the Olympic athletes, amazing. A really good movie, a storytelling, something that you're involved in, seeing really good. But let's not be fools, okay? By and large, the momentum is working vastly against us on both fronts.
I think they're at least trying to make it look like they have learned some lessons. I do think. I'm skeptical they have learned any. But I think they're at least trying to sell that they are.
So they're lying to us.
Or they're conflicted. I don't know their inner sanctums. I think that there's a conflict between some recognition of market forces and the agenda. You know, like people like Nerdrotic and Critical, the message, that's what they call it. That's what people like Nerdrotic and Critical Drinker refer to it as, the message, okay? I think there is great conflict there. And I think Trump's version of an apology on the vax is calling up RFK Jr. and I'll never, back mandates and, I don't trust big pharma, without having to admit he was wrong. You know what I'm saying? Okay. That's his version of an apology, I think. I think that similarly, they want their version of an apology to be, we just made a very profane R-rated movie and it wasn't even remotely woke. Wasn't even remotely woke. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I think they are trying, I think they're hoping that'll be taken as an apology. But they are also unsure within their own ecosystem, how much can they actually break away from that? I'm going to be fascinated to see next summer when James Gunn's Superman movie comes out, because this is a guy that has made a very successful career with irreverent content, and he is making it known that he intends to make this in a Christopher Reeve idealistic for a modern audience tone and vibe. And it appears that much of the movie, from what I've seen from some of the plot that's been out there, centers around the centralizing superheroes into basically operatives for corporate America and the state, and removing their individualism, and Superman represents a threat to that. Okay, which would get back into the whole Elon Musk conversation we had last segment. Do you even understand what you're saying? You're actually going against your own worldview when you say this. You understand that, right? Okay, we're the people for individualism. And they're the autocrats over there.
But even if they pull a great movie off, if they're just sedating us and not calling us to action, what is the point?
That's a great point.
The whole Avengers series was incredible. Mm-hmm. We are taking it right up the backside as a culture right now, and we can't be bothered.
Well, we're going to be bothered to bring you even more, to bother you more with the overtime. We're going to stick around and record that for subscribers. For the rest of you, we will see you tomorrow. Until then, Romans 8:28.